Like most continents, Africa is so large, it is difficult or impossible to generalize over such a large area. Geography, language, politics, and religion, they all have contributed to Africa's lack of political unity. Unlike other continents, Africa has never had a universal state or religion that characterizes the area. Despite this, however, Africa does have a history of large states and even empires following the introduction of Christianity and Islam, particularly south of the Sahara Desert. Some African societies were stateless, organized through kinship or other methods of social organization. Power in these societies was exercised through a council, or families, or the community itself, rather than a ruler and a court. Peoples in the forests of Western Africa formed secret societies where men and women controlled the customs and beliefs and limited the power of these rulers. These societies developed across lineage divisions where loyalty transcended family ties. They settled disputes, maintained stability, and were an alternative to state institutions. Now, despite Africa's diversity, African societies do share common elements. The Bantu migration, for example, spread a language that formed the basis of numerous African languages. All individual languages could differ in vocabulary and structure, but the migration allowed for neighboring peoples to understand one another. This is just one aspect of African society that many had in common. Others we'll be discussing in upcoming lectures. By 1000, Bantu peoples settled in most of Africa south of the equator, and Kushite, Sudanese, Mande, and other peoples established communities in lands far from their original homelands. Some African peoples undertook migrations long thereafter, even into the 19th century. By 1000, most of the migrations were complete, and for the next several centuries, Africans will build societies on the foundations of communities that the Bantu and other migrations had generated. The principal early result of the migrations was the spread of agriculture and herding to almost all parts of Africa, excluding the deserts and rainforests. As they established agricultural societies, cultivators and herders displaced the hunting, gathering, and fishing peoples who inhabited Sub-Saharan Africa and absorbed them. By 500 BC, Bantu-speaking peoples mastered iron metallurgy, enabling them to fashion tools that facilitated the extension of agriculture. By the early centuries AD, cultivation and herding reached the southernmost parts of Africa. Those developments resulted in increased production, a rising population, and pressure for continuing migration. The population history of Sub-Saharan Africa reflects the significance of metallurgy and even bananas. Before iron working, the population of Sub-Saharan Africa stood about 3.5 million. By the turn of the millennium, human numbers exceeded 1 million. After banana cultivation, that jumped to 17 million. By 1000, the population had surpassed 22 million people. The migrations, the expansion of Bantu population, and the establishment of new communities contributed to changes in the relationships between Bantu and foraging peoples, such as the forest dwellers of Central Africa. In earlier times, the Bantu regarded forest peoples as guides to the environments that were unfamiliar, and oral traditions suggest that they relied on these foragers' expertise to learn about the possibilities that new environments offered. As Bantu populations surged, it became increasingly difficult for foragers to flourish. Some forest peoples joined the cultivators and integrated into Bantu society. Others retreated into the forests. By 1000, the Bantu approached the limits of their expansion. Because agricultural peoples occupied most of the continent, migration was much more difficult. Sub-Saharan African peoples developed complex governments that enabled them to organize their existing societies more efficiently. Early Bantu societies did not depend on a hierarchy of officials or bureaucratic apparatus to administer their affairs. Bantu peoples governed themselves through family and kinship groups. Bantu peoples settled in villages with populations of 100 people. Male heads of the family constituted a village's ruling council. The most prominent of the family heads presided over the village as the chief and represented the settlement when it dealt with neighboring peoples. A group of villages constituted a district, which became the principal focus of ethnic loyalties. Usually there was no chief or larger government for the district. This organization lends itself well to small-scale communities, but kin-based societies often grew. One of the most active areas of political development was the basin of the Kongo River. After 1000, population pressures and military challenges encouraged kin-based societies in the Congo to form small states embracing a few villages each. By 1200, conflicts between these states resulted in the organization of larger principalities that could resist political and military pressures better than small kingdoms. One of the more prosperous was the Kingdom of Congo, which participated in trade networks involving copper, cloth, and shells from the Atlantic Ocean. Its people were skilled at other products, such as weaving and pottery. Woodworking and metallurgy was highly esteemed. There was a sharp division of labor, with men clearing forests and scrub, producing palm oil and palm wine, while women took care of cultivation, domesticated animals, and household duties. The central government included the king and officials who oversaw military, judicial, and financial affairs. Beneath the central government were 6 provinces administered by governors. Villages were ruled by chiefs, and they provided the local government. Although the kinship was hereditary, chieftains were not, which allowed central authority the ability to control subordinates. Congo was the most centralized of the early Bantu kingdoms. The king or central administrators could appoint or replace local officials at will, and the central government maintained a currency system based on seashells from the Indian Ocean. Despite this higher degree of centralization, the Congo kingdom was more of a confederation of smaller states under the authority of a king. Congo provided the organization from the 14th until the 17th century, when Portuguese slave traders undermined the authority of this central government.